As you can probably see, this is a new system that we have. We used to have to roll things up, put wires everywhere, but this is part of a renovation of this building, which used to be the Social Security Center for Lake County until it was partially purchased, partially gifted to us about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. Next week, this is the fun week for me and the senior staff and the faculty, and because this is the week we get to meet with families. And next week is our board weekend. And we're looked at almost as rigorously as the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools looked at us last year. Right now, as soon as I get done here, I'll be going back to my office and continuing to write my self-evaluation. In higher education and in nonprofits, self-evaluations are quite big. And I know in the more competitive business world, they're not looked well on, but I'd rather do a self-evaluation first so that I can figure out what they're really going to say about me later. So that's what I'm doing. My self-evaluation is about the previous fiscal year, and that ended on June 30th. Last May, we had done so many things that we put a video together for the board because I didn't want to spend a half hour talking about it. So for those of you who were here last year, you'll see what last year was and what kind of things that we've done. And if you weren't here, you'll see a lot of work that was done before your son or daughter arrived. So can we put on the video?
Welcome to my room.
So that was last year, and this year we have definitely not stopped, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm actually going to start out with a thing which I feel is important, but the least important about the two things that I really want to focus on. So, the development of the campus, and as you probably all know, I'm visually impaired, so this is probably one of my more dangerous presentations because I'm not going to be able to click, and I'm going to rely on my good friend Steve Muller, and right now my vice president. If it gets messed up, we'll see. But what you should know is that in 2014, we commissioned a company called Credo. Credo has worked with 196 private colleges to upgrade them and to bring them to a student-centered community. And they've done some really remarkable work. And they worked with us for a year, including reviews with faculty, staff. I believe they did a parent assessment, because what I really liked about them when they came to pitch their wares was that the first question wasn't how beautiful do you want the campus to be? What buildings do you want on campus? They asked what do your students and families want? What do they expect from the Beacon experience? And so that really struck me, because all the others try to design your wow, wow, wonderful campus and all these buildings without asking, how should it be used most effectively to serve the mission of the institution? So this was the master plan, and we have pretty much followed it. We also have a strategic plan for 2016 through 2020. We are 2 years through that, and we've already achieved or are on our way to achieving 27 of the 31 goals. So we've worked very, very, very quickly. When in 2013 I arrived on campus, I did not know where the campus was. And so the first thing that we needed to do was to create a campus that put students first, because many of our students have not known that first. They've been second in the K through 12 system. And I wanted them to have first. And so that's, people say, why are you going out and raising the money to fix up the buildings? Well, two reasons. Number one, I want those buildings to be repurposed for our mission. Secondly, I want them to look serious, so that students who go in there are proud, the faculty and staff are proud, you're proud, the community's proud that they have an institution like this. So I call these Disneys. I know it's not a very, it's kind of trite, but I call what we did Disneys. Now, for the Studio Arts program, which had just been accredited by the Southern Association, we had an old fitness center, a workout center. It was privately owned. It went out of business. It was sitting there. And so we did a long-term lease on that property and reconstructed the inside to begin to serve those purposes. But what it looked like on the outside was anything but an academic building. As a matter of fact, I thought it screamed, "We don't care." So that was the first project that we did. Somebody was generous enough to give us $60,000. And in Florida, you can do projects like this for about $75,000. I'm not used to that up in New England, but you, but you can do projects, and that project cost about $75,000. We then had a group of storefronts, which on the inside were purposed pretty well for our mission. They did look like academic, higher education academic facilities on the inside. But again, on the outside, you couldn't tell whether this was a storefront for a bunch of little mom and pop shops, or you couldn't tell if it was a college or a university. So what we did was we went and got an artist, and literally this is how it worked. We went and got an artist and said, what could this look like to make it first-rate academic? And this was the artist's first rendering. And then we have we have several talented people who have made this campus come alive. One of them is named Daniel DiVincenzo, and he is both a architect and a builder. And I call him Michelangelo because that's what he tells me to call him. But, you know, these aren't the Sistine Chapel, but you know what? They're really, really beautiful. The one thing about Michelangelo is that he does have ADHD. It's very evident. And the second thing is that he's never on time. So you can see down the street a little bit. So this was the construction of this project. This project, what we've also tried to do, and the board's very happy about it, and I think you should be too, is we've tried to do all these projects without touching or having an impact on the tuition and fees. So all of this was fundraised money. And that's enormously important. And you know, we're in the beginning of a capital campaign, so you're going to be hearing from me a lot. But the fundraised money allows us to keep our tuition as low as possible. And so what we did was, when we did these projects, we raced out there and looked for funding. So this came from the Fogg Foundation, and it really transformed that storefront. We also put an elevator. It was one of the only grandfathered buildings on campus under ADA, and I thought it totally inappropriate for an institution that happens to focus on students with challenges to not have an elevator. So the elevator was put in, and originally they told us that was a $75,000 project. It cost about $135,000 to put an elevator in. And so all of our projects now have elevators, which when I first look at the cost, I always have to factor in about 135, now I know 135,000. If you've seen Durand Garden, it's actually more beautiful in the evening. It's really beautiful during the daytime, but I invite you to walk through there in the evening. Great campuses have wonderful areas for reflection, for socializing, for decompressing. And they also speak to a quality of caring, that the campus cares. So this project actually was going to be 3 years from now. And a gentleman named Robert Durand walked in and spoke with us, and Steve Muller worked with him. And he said, I want to do something for my wife, who just passed away. He had nothing to do with Beacon. And what plans do you have? Now, we didn't know whether he was, what the size of the gift was. And so we said, well, scholarship, we really need scholarship money, and you know, we've got these. No, I want to see a project. So this was just a sketch a year and a half ago. I don't even think we had that sketch, but we might have. We showed it to him. He said, that's the one I want to do. How much is that going to cost? And we said 150,000. Ended up costing 155, believe it or not. Again, in Florida, you couldn't do that in New England. In Florida, it's 155,000 to do what we did there. 4 fountains and all the rest. But what Mr. Durand's generosity allowed was for us to put this in place 2 years earlier than we had anticipated, and to really begin to pull the campus together and to give students a space. Before that, they were hanging out on the sidewalk. That's where they'd socialize, or they'd go into the library. And it was a pretty active library. So this is allowing us, and it's well used, just as the Matthew Pospahala park next door. It's well used by students, and it's well used by faculty as well as kind of a reflective place. So that the building that we're doing right now, the first sketch you saw was that the whole block was going to look like what is now Fogg Hall, which, by the way, is going to be dedicated in January. That's when the trustees of the foundation are going to be here. You're all invited, particularly those of you from the north, because it's nice and warm here in January, or relatively warm here in January. The big problem is that's a fairly long block, and so we decided we didn't want it all to look as one. The actual structure of the building is actually 4 separate elements. So for the final 2 elements, we decided not to use the same motif, but to go with a bit more modern, and because the sciences and computers and things are over there, we decided to have it as a more modern, contemporary look to it, with kind of a scientific bent, good lines and all the rest. Now, you're talking to a blind man, so the real problem here is that I understand the concept, and others around me tell me that the concept looks good. And so we had some wrangling about what the concept was and if it looked good, and the truth of the matter is we came up with a design that I think is very, very nice. It's going to look a lot nicer than that, but that was the first artist rendering. I want to tell you that these windows, I had seen these at a place called Florida Polytech. You may have seen them before. We're spending some very good money because this was also part of a FOG gift and a Rogers Foundation gift. There's a type of glass that you can actually make opaque, and then you can make it clear. And the first time they showed it to me, I said, "Where'd that come from?" And they said, "Actually, it came from NASA. They put this on the space shuttle." And if you haven't been to Florida Polytech, you really need to go down. It's just an incredible school. And I was with the president, and they were showing me this. And I was with Dale Herald, and I said, "I want that. And I want that for our students, and I know where we can put it." And particularly this is important on Main Street. This is particularly important. So the 2 things we did, just so you know that we're really paying attention. This glass, if there's ever a nuclear explosion, come here, because that glass is really thick. And it's got a maximum heat insulation and noise insulation. And then behind it, it's going to have this glass. And Michelangelo said to me, "Dr. Hagerty, do you know how much that's going to cost?" I said, "I don't care. I want this." And again, first. The building that we're in right now looked like a bunker. It was a Social Security office. But let me tell you something. As you remember, or some of you may remember, I wasn't here last year because I was in the hospital with bacterial pneumonia that I got right there, by the way, because I'm on immunosuppressants for my eyes, and stupidly I thought I could sleep overnight with 120 coughing students. And what happened was I ended up getting bacterial pneumonia. But what we did find out was that this was one of the only buildings that didn't lose power in Hurricane Irma. And we couldn't figure out why, because it used to be the Social Security office, and it needed to have its machines running. And under those circumstances, we are hot-wired to the police station. So something that we found out, and we're not telling them that we're still hot-wired. Because honestly, it was awesome. I mean, we had, nothing really went off here. But this didn't look particularly good on the outside. It looked like a bunker. And so the Rogers Foundation gave us $125,000 to redo the front of the building. And I've always believed that a good liberal arts campus should have like a little gazebo area, walkway, and we're trying to create that in all the features that we're working on. And remember, we're not 30 years old yet, we're 29 years old, so we have a long way to go, but the truth of the matter is, if you think carefully about this and try to take care of the things you've already been given and then build new buildings, you're much better off. Because the worst thing about building a new building, as we're finding out with Rapp Hall, which we knew would happen, it becomes so beautiful. I say to people, it's like the guy who buys a new robe because he doesn't like the other one, looks a little tattered. And he sits down after he gets his new robe, and he looks down at his slippers. And he goes, oh, those slippers, they don't look quite as good. And you know, it goes on and on and on. So we needed to take care of what we had been given. And so that's why you see the development the way it's going here. So I really like and believe me, this building gets a lot of use. If I get down, and occasionally I do, at about 3 o'clock or 3:30, I know I can come over here and there'll be at least 30 students. Some here playing these advanced card games that I would be totally lost on, and then over there and playing video games, but there are about 30, sometimes I would say 40. And I think of what the other options may have been for our students. Not that I'm saying our poor students. What I'm saying is they have a community that they feel safe in. They have a community that will launch them. Are we perfect? Absolutely not. Are we working on it? Absolutely. 2 years ago, when we refurbished this building on the outside, and this whole new system is part of an overall redesign of this building for this year. The speaker system, the cameras, the projection system, and the new chairs. I hope they're more comfortable than the last ones. And then there's going to be actually a new rug. I'm hoping that we can do that during the semester break in December or January, because I'm told, I can't see it, but I'm told this is not looking too good, and now that we're fixing everything else up, it's like those dowdy slippers. So Mitch's place, we had a beloved young man. He was a second semester senior, and he got in a motorcycle accident, and he passed away. His parents wanted to do something that was meaningful. His name was Mitch Paspahala. Something that was meaningful. And in between these two buildings, this building and the store building where the Learning Specialists are, Center for Student Success, it looked terrible. And so we were coming up with the concept of pocket parks, and we said, let's put the first pocket park there. So we did, and it's a place for reflection for the students. If you haven't walked over there, after this, you might want to take a walk over there. I think it's really pretty spectacular. Beacon had no fields until two years ago. We had no playing fields. Healthy activities outside our classroom lead to healthy learning inside the classroom. Any liberal arts institution will tell you that. And so we started to pick up property that was fallow, and to begin to create an area where our students could at least have outdoor work. Many people have said, what about a nice big gymnasium? The truth of the matter is, I have miles to go before I sleep, and that's probably a priority that's less essential to this campus than the other things that we're trying to accomplish here. There's one additional feature, so if you go there, over to those fields, the most remarkable thing is when Oksana, my wife Oksana, works here, when Oksana and I drive home at night, I always say to her, how many students are on that field? It's, 6:30 at night. And she'll tell me 30, 40. And it's really what we want. So, and that's just about every night. We've been putting the activities into place, which we didn't have, the recreational activities. The one thing that we're going to do this year is to light it, so that students can have the lights until 10, 10:30, probably not going to go to 11. But that should be done within the next month, because I really want them up before it gets really dark with standard time. Rap Hall. I can't say anything more than It really places us in a different competitive range in liberal arts higher education. It is as beautiful as we had hoped. We're learning some things about quads of students with single rooms, as any institution would with the students with our profile. We're working on that. We're continuously trying to improve how that hall system works. But very honestly, it is such a leap forward for the way that we can now cluster new students, freshmen and new transfer students, so that they can begin to work into the Beacon system. And it's also proximal to the campus. The railway station, the city of Leesburg approached us probably in October of my first year, so October 2013. They said, we have this railway station, it's over a century old, it's still in pretty good shape. That probably wasn't true, but still in pretty good shape, and it has a, we use it for recreation equipment. Would you be interested in it? And we had rented a very small space for fitness equipment. And it was a very small program. And so we took a tour of it, and I thought, what college campus has its own railway station? And what campus has its own railway station that's 100 years old that can be rehabbed to become a fitness center? So the railway station, we negotiated. I am paying 100 times more for the lease than I wanted to, so the deal I wanted was 30-year lease, renewable, which I got, and I wanted it for $1 a year, and they made me pay $100 a year for it. So I paid 100 times more than I wanted to. The board slapped my hand, but Phase 3 is going to be done next summer, and Phase 3 is that large area on the back end. It's going to be another fitness area, and then we're going to start building a park around it, the way that we've done in some of the other places. And as we're growing with students, we recognize that we're up against it, and I'll talk just a little bit about that. We're trying to push things out so that there's additional space for our students, and we can create learning spaces. I can tell you, I was a very raw undergraduate, and it wasn't until I found my learning spaces that I began to turn it around. I'd already decided in my head I wanted to turn it around, I just didn't know how to do it. And I needed a number of learning spaces. I can still remember that learning space. It was a little corner in an old library, and that was my corner. And I'd listen to symphony records, because it was in the music area of it. For all of our students, we're trying to push things out with the resources that we have, incrementally making change. The Compass Center, there's always lore to every one of these, so we want to thank the American Legion for having illegal gambling in that building because they needed to get out of town quickly because that's how they were making their money, and they couldn't do it in the confines of the city of Leesburg, so they wanted to sell it and to have another place outside the confines of Leesburg. And I'm just the kind of guy to take advantage of something like that. And so we created a center because we were really starting with our writing center, and now we're putting a reading center in this, which I'm very excited about. The kinds of things that we needed with some large space, this really helped. Plus, we needed office space, and it came along just at the right time. We literally turned this around in about 8 weeks from the time that we purchased it, and we only knew probably 3 weeks before that the American Legion had to get out of town. So, and it was in a block that we already had. This is where the remainder of our art program does a lot of their work. That one's not high on my priority for reconstruction, but it does need to be reconstructed. And I think it's enormously important that all of our buildings look like we really mean it in the disciplines that we're in. This is our latest lease. We have a lease option, and we'll be purchasing this in 2 more years, but we got a very good, advantageous lease. Our focus, one of our focuses, in addition to reading, writing, math, the basics, is career development on the back end. And we have added another position to that for internships, and we are trying to identify a location where we can have as a career development area. And so this building is now our career development center. It's still being developed, although the offices are in there. The students know enough to go there. And now we will have something that we haven't had in the past, a focal point for career development. We have plenty to do in that area, we know that. In behind this building, there's a beautiful greenhouse that I've coveted. I know coveting's a sin, but I've coveted that building because I really thought it would make a great counseling center. And it would be far more private for our students who go to counseling than what we've had in the past. And unfortunately, the woman who happened to be a superintendent of schools, by the way, passed away. She was quite elderly. She passed away last year. And the family still wants to hold on to it because they aren't sure they actually want to sell it. So we offered a lease option on that. And right now, we have finished the move-in, and it is our counseling and wellness center because counseling is part of the overall wellness program that we're now moving forward on, and I'll talk about that in just a second. Now, some of you characters have said to me as I walked into various meetings here in the last day, boy, there's not much going on that lot over there, is there? You know how much that hurts me because, you know, I just, and it's been said many times, people try to goad me, what is going to go in that property? It is the college's first core academic building designed specifically for the academic purposes, instructional purposes of the college. It will also have, it has to have a large auditorium in the center. And because right now, for instance, yesterday, had we not set up the program the way that we did with people going and seeing learning specialists, this room can accommodate probably 250, and you can feel it's getting warm here when there are crowds in here. But we had 440 people signing up, 440 families signing up. There is no place right now in Leesburg. There is going to be one with a new community center, which is only going to be about a block and a half away from us. And that will be a leased space that we can use. But we need something right here on campus where if we want to have a community meeting with all the students, we're not going to be able to get all the students and faculty and everything, but if we want to have one with all the students, we need to have a space for that. And I believe, and I've seen these done, it's not going to be round, but a theater in the square where really the seats are coming into to a middle space, because that will really increase the capacity and it will look more modern, I think, as well. But that's where we are. Steve, how much time do I have? Like I'm really getting to the good stuff now. Let me do this in 7 minutes. I will do it in 7 minutes. This is the most important piece for me. I've been here 5 years, and the average tenure of a modern college president used to be like 12, 15 years. I did a presidency for 14 years. I like staying at places and seeing what I can do with faculty and staff. And they know, the board knows that I love the mission, I love the students. But I said to them last fall, something rather bold, but something that I really meant. I said, you know, we've been able to restructure the institution over these first 5 years. We've been able to begin to bring it out to as the national liberal arts college that it is, and we are. And very candidly, with all the other stuff we're doing, international campus. But I have one more presidency left in me. You know I love it, but if we sign a long-term agreement, I want you to understand the consequences of that, because I am all about a cultural transformation of the institution. And I am about a cultural change here now. And they said, okay. I explained to them what I was talking about, and we don't have enough time for me to explain to you exactly all the little pieces of it. But I've already said I want first for students who have had second. But the other thing that I want for this institution is that we are going to be not unique, we're going to be singular in American higher education. We have a lot to teach American higher education about educating at least 15% of their students in traditional institutions of higher education. I want for this institution not to be what you may have seen it as, which is an LD college. What I believe will sustain this institution and will serve our students and families the best is to be a superior liberal arts institution that happens to focus exclusively on this population of students. It hasn't been tried before, not in the way that I'm suggesting. So they said yes. I signed a nice long-term agreement, and you know, unless I meet my untimely demise or slip on a political banana peel, you know, I hope to be here at least another 5 to 7 years. And then it's probably time to hand over the reins, but that's my plan anyway. I read a book a long time ago called The Power of Habit. It's a great book, great book. And it basically says if you really want to make meaningful change, it really holds. You look at habits. They talk a funny story about how Paul O'Neill changed Alcoa, wasn't it? Wasn't Alcoa? And if you focus on just a few keystone habits, you'll be amazed that everything else changes. Because you set up new systems, new ways of thinking just to pursue those habits. So these may seem very simple to you, very simple. But in the spring, and again this summer before we got here, and again last week at the community forum, I talked about the two keystone habits, very two core habits that I want to be paramount in everything that we do here, and one is scholarship. And I'm not just talking about, by the way, I'm not talking about faculty knowing their discipline. Because we're SACS accredited through 2028, by the way, with no findings and no recommendations, never happened to me in my career. And that's where this institution is, through 2028. So rest assured that if you're paying that tuition, there's going to be an accredited degree on the other end. That's a very good one. The kind of scholarship I'm talking about is knowing everything we can about these learners. Because this field is evolving very, very quickly. I started out in 1976 as a teacher. Then I was a policymaker in 1978. We didn't even know what ADHD was. We thought ASD was a form of mental illness. We put them under other health impaired. And then I get to the 2000s, and you know, I'm over in the dark side of traditional higher education, and I always watched out for these students. And the truth of the matter is, I want the people who are here to be scholars about how we teach these students, how we serve these students. We are better than anybody else. But for me, that isn't enough. We are better than anybody else, but that's not enough. I want a certain base of knowledge across this entire institution about serving these students. What have we done? We've done a number of things so far. There is ongoing training with specialization. Right now, I would say that we're getting pretty strong in the area of ADHD. I intend to do the same thing with autistic spectrum disorder and specific learning disabilities, as well as some related executive function areas. It's going to take us a couple of years, but there'll be a baseline for everybody, and that's a scholarship. Service. Our students need the little victories celebrated. That's how we hook them. They need the little victories. And so service is not only supervising a club, it's not only having office hours, but it's actually showing up 2 or 3 times a semester at one of the students' activities where they may be performing. They may have a presentation. We need to do that. Some do it all the time, but I want this habit instilled in this institution and in the people who serve here. And for our undergraduates, safety and wellness. You probably know a young woman was hit out in front on Main Street, crossing the street. We have an issue with Leesburg on Main Street, and it is a safety issue. But we also have to keep reinforcing with our students. When you're crossing the street, take the earbuds out. Concentrate. Look. So you should know that we are in active discussions with the city of Leesburg, including the commission, as well as the police, about what they're going to do, but how they can help us increase the safety of our students on this campus. You should know that we're now in, you never think it's going to happen, but I've been on too many boards with other presidents where it's happened. So we're now putting in place a pretty sophisticated emergency system. We already had an emergency system, but what I'm talking about is active shooter preparation, active shooter training. We do have a huge advantage with the police department being right here, and they have been wonderful. We have another meeting with them next week. You probably knew that we had an active shooter drill that was very successful, and it happened across with the library. And the problem is we also need to figure out new ways of communicating with our students, because what do you do in the morning when you get up? You go and you take a look at your emails, right? Our kids don't look at emails. They don't look at emails. They tweet, they Instagram. So we need to be at the leading edge of how we're communicating with them, and we're working on that right now as well. And then wellness. We have a long way to go, but the fitness center was the first stage of it. Getting a really dedicated system in place where we not only have an RN on campus, but we have the ability to access the hospital, which is, again, not too far away from here in the emergency center. All those things are a piece of this, but they're only a piece. And I know what the issues are out there, and I appreciate you not calling me with them, but we have a senior staff every 2 weeks, and I know what the issues are. And it's important that I know, because I'm trying to push these 4 habits for the next 5 years. And the other piece is that the reforms that we are attempting to implement are based on research and on our own experience. Not all research is accurate, but most of it is. And our own experience, we trust our own experience because we've been at it for quite a while. And I just want to talk about, and I said 7 minutes, I'm probably 8 now. I just want to talk about some of the things that we have done. We changed the learning specialist model. Some people don't like it. Some people want that one learning specialist, but the reason that we did that is the research tells us that this particular profile of student needs to be able to cope with change. And they shouldn't be hearing from one professional. Part of the strength, I know 400 is a lot of students for this institution, but part of the strength of the 400 is that this year we added 23 new faculty and staff to this institution, which when I got here had 78 faculty and staff. Now we have 120. More than 120, 125. My finance committee keeps reminding me of that. And we will continue to add. So we changed the learning specialist system, and the training that they're undergoing is along with this scholarship area. We have added people who have expertise we have not had in the past, and we're very happy about it. And you may have met some of these people yesterday. You will meet them today. For learning specialists, you find out one is a licensed speech therapist. That's really important for us because I think a third of our students probably have speech issues. And that is going to be something that we're going to have to deal with. This year, you may or may not know, we got a first-rate reading specialist who, when I interviewed her on the phone last summer, I knew this was special. And what we're finding is devastating. And it's not just devastating to us at Beacon, it's devastating across this country because it suggests a level of malpractice, and I will use it, and pushing students along because I've read some of these files. And we're going to put our sword in the sand, we're going to put the stake in the sand, and we're going to deal with that. And we're going to deal with the writing issues and the math issues. Now, you may have already dealt with some of these things if you're a sophomore, junior, or senior parent. And I apologize that over the 29 years, this institution hasn't done the kind of focused work that I think a great institution can do. So I may not be popular on occasion, but I truly believe in this. And I truly believe that as a capstone to my career, that I'm working with some of the best faculty I've ever worked with. Has nothing to do with the mission of the institution. They're great faculty. And staff, absolutely committed. My job is to never be self-satisfied. My job is to keep pushing it up a notch because our students deserve it. So if you hear bad things about me, believe only half of them, all right? The one other thing that I'll talk about, then I'm going to stop. I have found it odd at traditional institutions that we think that students who have had difficulties in high school, they may have ADHD, they may have any number of issues. All of a sudden, the day they get on campus, boing, they're a college student, all ready to be independent and move forward. Now, you know that we have said, please step back. Please step back. Let us work on their independence. And most of you have been good. Some we've had some calls from, but what we're trying to do is to gain the independence for them that they may not so desperately want now, many of them do, but which they will desperately want. And that's why we have that emerging adult session later on. One of the things with our students has been that sometimes they don't show up for meetings, no matter how many times you tell them. Sometimes we don't know that they're having real difficulties, although we really try to track them. So we've added what's called a community educator, who goes and actually works in their natural setting. The chopping block, this building, even in the residences. And if they aren't showing up and there's a real problem, we do try to get them. I could take a hint. We put them there. So this community educator, his name is Jim Borden. You may or may not have met him. It really has added another dimension to try to get these students to get into a habit of more disciplined ways of going about their day. So we've made all these changes, and we have grown to 400. As you know, it was 187 when I arrived. And you may think, oh, they're packing students in. What you should understand, we know the numbers, we know the facts, that we really tried to keep the number of incoming students down this year. So it became even more competitive. It's about 57% of the students that we accept. But the largest growth, what caused this growth this year and the year before, is a number of rising sophomores and rising juniors. So they're retaining. So we're doing something right. They're retaining. And I don't know too many other colleges that wouldn't want this Cinderella scenario for them. So we have plenty of work to do. I recognize that. I want to thank you. I want to thank Steve for not only doing this, but I know I'm going to hear about it later, how I kept you. But listen, thank you for being here this morning.